You are listening to Single Smart Female. This is Jen, explaining the possibilities in your love life and examining your Mantourage dating experiences. I am here to help you do life and love on your terms by tipping the scales of love permanently in your favor. So don't forget to text this episode to all of your single smart girlfriends, and let's get started. Howdy, single smart female. It's your romantic fairy godmama coming to you with a single smart female listener question. Now, this listener question, I can't even find where she comes from. Oh, she is from Maryland. And Miss Overwhelmed with Options writes, "Hi Jen, I've been Mantourage dating for 5 months now and have known about it for a few years. I love it, but I feel like I can't keep up with all these men. Even when I'm in contact with just 3 over a few days, I feel like I can't keep up with it. So now, having about 10 men in my Mantourage, I often forget to respond to them for days, which I feel gives the impression that I'm not interested. How can I organize all of these men and Mantourage more efficiently? Thank you." Okay, Miss Overwhelmed with Options, let's dive into this. And number one is, before you even worry about organizing the Mantourage, what's really, truly important is make sure that your life is relatively organized. Now, does that mean you have to have everything perfect, everything lined up? I mean, some of you may, but you do not have to be obsessive about that. You just want to have a good relative grasp on your life and not feel like everything is going in 100 pieces. Because a lot of times when we're dating, especially if we find somebody we really like, we'll let all kinds of stuff go and not tend to it. And then something changes with them and we feel guilt on top of feeling crazy pants, and it increases hyperfocus and it causes all these problems. And I'm not saying that you are here in that moment by any means, but it is important to have a relatively good grasp and organization on your life. I also recommend, ladies, this is so very, very important, and I am going to be talking about this more and more. Not yet, but I will be talking about this more and more. Your health is important. So in prioritizing your health is, that's something that needs to happen. Yes, have some caffeine. Do not live on caffeine. Yes, you can grind sometimes, but make sure you're getting enough sleep. You don't have to be perfect. Again, this isn't, you're not going to die if you don't get this all perfectly, but it is important to prioritize these things in your life and take, I'm going to use the word relatively again, relatively good care of yourself and have a relatively good grasp of organization in your life. That's the first thing before you even look at the Mantourage stuff. Now, the second thing is it's really helpful and important to learn what I call sweet spot communication around managing male attention. I'm going to tell you right now, it makes life so much easier. But full disclosure on this is not something I teach much of on the podcast. This is exclusively for my secret society members and something special that we work with. But it's really helpful, not just with men, but it's taught for men, but it helps with your entire life. And it makes a world of difference of taking the pressure off of you and allowing things to fold more organically in your Mantourage. Now, number 3, it is totally acceptable. I know I did it. I would be talking to about 10 men at one time, but it's totally acceptable to talk to significantly less or even a few less, okay? You can have people who aren't officially in your Mantourage that maybe you hear from periodically and not somebody that you have to keep up with. But it is totally acceptable to have, 3 to 5 guys that you're actively dating in a Mantourage and feel really good about it. And if you meet somebody and you're like, oh, should I date him? And, really, I don't have the space for it right now, so no. And if it works out later on, great. But it's not important to have a high number, and perfectly acceptable to consider lowering that number. Now, when I was going through my Mantourage experience, I was doing a massive experiment, and I had the ability to do all that, and the mental bandwidth as well as the physical bandwidth to be able to do that all the time. And there's a lot of different pieces in it because, a lot of different emotions can come up during the Mantourage, and I was equipped at the time to be able to handle all that, which is what we do in Secret Society, is help equip you so that you can handle the number you want. But most of the time, I'm going to be honest, for most women who are success-driven and really going for the rest of their life, I don't recommend necessarily 10. Not because she can't do it, because obviously she can, but it doesn't really bear any more fruit. It might be fun for a short stint, but it doesn't make anything much more magical. Again, if you have some outliers within your Mantourage who aren't really part of your Mantourage, just somebody who comes in here or there, then the numbers can be a little bit higher. Honestly, I mainly recommend between, let's say, 3 to 6, okay? That's not a hard and fast rule. I want to make that very, very clear. It's just not necessary to have these high numbers of men that you're talking to. Now, you might be talking to, if you're talking to men online, it might be a little bit higher, but that's another art form that we do in Secret Society, is where you learn how to, you're not actively dating them when you're talking to them online at the beginning, but you learn how to vet them properly and engage with them at the beginning to see if they merit going out on a first date with you. So number 3 was consider taking out some of these men. Now, number 4 is just some, really easy organization measurements. Keep them organized in your phone. Say you have Dave here, and Dave is, and then you give him, I can't speak to Android, so my apologies, ladies, for that. But I know in iPhone, in that you have your first name, your last name, and then you have a little place where you can basically say what company they're from. What I like to use in my life, because I don't have an active Mantourage, but I use it for lots of other purposes, and I would use it now if I had an active Mantourage, is I'd use that first name, and then for the last name, I wouldn't even put it in the company part, but I'd put it in the last name. I'd put something that makes it really apparent who I'm talking to very quickly, so it snaps in my head. For instance, let's say this is Dave, and Dave is delightfully redheaded, something like that. Okay, it doesn't have to be, just physical attributes. It can be other stuff as well, but something that triggers in your head as soon as you see his name, exactly who you're talking to. Okay? When you're Mantourage dating, you can also put in there Mantourage as well, Mantourage member. When you're Mantourage dating, it is very, very important that when you're texting, okay, make sure you are double checking who you're sending messages to so that you don't accidentally send the message to the wrong guy. I've had it happen a lot. Most of the time it's very inconsequential, but it's just something to be aware of when you are texting. Now, the other thing is that when you're on a date, your phone needs to be on Do Not Disturb. Okay, guys' names coming up on your phone while you're on a date, and he can see this going on even though he can't read what's going on. Sometimes we think it's good to make him a little bit jealous, this or that. It doesn't put that kind of pressure on him. It aggravates a wound versus that does anything else. So I want to make sure it's just not classy. So make sure on a date that, if you choose to be on a date, you don't have to go on these really long dates, by the way. You can make them shorter dates. But if you choose to go on a date with a guy, you're there, mentally and physically, not just physically, so that you get to explore this guy and you get to explore each other. And if there's potential for any romantic connection at all, which you cannot do if you are on your phone during that time or talking with other guys. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's going to happen a lot. You're going to be on a date, you're having a great time. Some other guy that you really like is going to text you during that time. Why? Because men have a radar. They can tell when you're having fun. Well, they don't necessarily know this consciously. Let me make that very clear. But they can feel when you're having fun with another man, which is part of the beauty of the Mantourage, but it's also something you don't want to exploit. So put your phone on Do Not Disturb. So again, going through them all. 1, make sure your life is relatively organized and that you're prioritizing taking care of yourself and not letting things go crazy pants, so that you always feel grounded and are able to feel empowered to handle all pieces of your Mantourage and what you want to do with that. 2, learn sweet spot communication with me. If you want to apply for a Secret Society of Adored Women, you can go to Secret Society of Adored Women and schedule your application interview. 3, consider taking out some of these men. And 4, keep them organized in your phone. That's a great place to start, and put some disclaimers in there so that you always know who you're talking to. By the way, a couple other pieces I do want to add to this, just some afterthought pieces for you. So it's okay if you go a few days without talking to somebody. We don't have to be on top of it every day. But again, there is communication around managing male attention. I don't want you to think that you have to be on your phone all the time, always managing what's going on with these men. That is overwhelming and exhausting. And it might be thrilling for a week, But over time, you'll actually make your Mantourage feel like nothing but work. So I definitely suggest using all the other things that we're talking about to either thin out the herd. That's the worst phrase I think I've used on this podcast, but it's kind of funny at the same time. So to thin out the Mantourage, or just make sure that you're doing everything else so that you feel on top of everything and it doesn't feel constantly overwhelming, which if it is constantly overwhelming over time will work counteractively against what you're wanting to happen and will make it not near as fun as it can be. Okay, lover girl, it's time for the final thought on today's show. Having a large Mantourage is definitely thrilling short term, but long term it requires a lot of extra management skills, management of male attention, and management of your emotions. For many women, a medium Mantourage is the best option. Hey again, lover girl. Don't forget to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with all of your single smart girlfriends. And if you are truly ready to tip the scales of love permanently in your favor, then meet me over at secretsocietyofAdoredWomen.com to schedule your application interview to work with me directly. See you there.